As I get closer to hitting 1,000 subscribers and recently being nominated for YouTuber of the Month, I can't help but think that I should upload something a little bit more personal this time around. I think on my channel I do a pretty okay job of mixing the two, where I put a little bit of my own personal opinions and things, but I wanted to take this chance to talk about my gaming journey. And what that means is what games I was exposed to as a kid, what games made me the gamer and collector I am today, what happened throughout my life to get me to this point. Shout out to Femtrooper, who did a video about this just recently, her gaming journey. It really inspired me to really think about what happened from point A to point B to get me here. So let's get started. The first thing I was ever exposed to, like a lot of people, was the Nintendo Entertainment System. Being born in '91, I was late to the Nintendo Entertainment System, and what I mean by that is I was literally not born yet. My family had a Nintendo Entertainment System, and according to my mother, I started playing around with it when I was 8 months old. I don't have video of that quite yet, but that might be coming soon. I have very vague memories of the Nintendo Entertainment System. I remember Mario, and I remember a game where there's somebody surfing at the beginning. So, although it's where I started, it's not the console that had the most impact. The Super Nintendo is really where things started to pick up. As my mind was developing and I was able to comprehend how to even play video games, the Super Nintendo is really what started my journey. Super Mario World and Donkey Kong Country, the two staples of the Super Nintendo, is what I was exposed to as a kid. And at this point in my life, I still lived with my sisters, so it was a point of contention in the household. We were all fighting to play this system because of how amazing it was. I remember Donkey Kong Country kicking my butt over and over again. The stupid snow barrel level is the bane of my existence, but it developed my first love of platformers. I am a big fan of platformers, and I can thank Mario games and Donkey Kong Country for that. They are definitely the reason I am so fond of games like Shantae, Half Genie Hero, and things like Shovel Knight. You know, things that give you a challenge in platforming. I am in love with them, and I have the Super Nintendo to thank for that. Some other games I played on the Super Nintendo were games that were released due to like TV shows. So like Rocko's Modern Life,
Rocko's Modern Life,
Ren and Stimpy. I remember playing the Chester Cheetah game. That's really infuriating, but really they didn't influence me as much as the others did. Growing up, I was exposed to the Nintendo 64, but I actually didn't own one myself. It wasn't until later on in my life that I was able to get my hands on one, and I'll explain how I did that in a moment. Before that though, I was exposed to the Sega Genesis. One of our neighbors had one, and so I was exposed to Sonic 2, if I remember correctly, in brief little spurts, and I thought it was really entertaining, but Nintendo is what really had my attention. So you can understand why my room is the way that it is. I am a very Nintendo-oriented person and a Pokemon fan, and I'll explain that one in a little bit too. I remember having to go to this like daycare ran by a woman, and they owned the Nintendo 64. I was exposed to Mario Kart, Yoshi's Story, Mario 64. I was obsessed with this system, but I didn't have one. I always had to play at friends' houses. One of my friends in middle school had one. We would play that thing all the time. Harvest Moon 64. I had a lot of fun with the console, and I never even owned one. It wasn't until somebody gifted me a PlayStation 1, I think I was in middle school when that happened. Someone gave me a PS1, one of my mom's friends. I immediately went to school and traded that sucker for a Nintendo 64 from one of my friends. I don't remember even playing much of the PlayStation 1. That was also one of those consoles that was just kind of someone else's house. I didn't grow up in the mindset of being an adult gamer or, you know, playing the mature stuff, because that was the Sega Genesis, that was the PlayStation 1. I was perfectly content with my Nintendo consoles, and when I got that N64, I was so happy to have it, and I still love it today. That's why I have so many of them. The N64 might be my favorite console to collect for. Then a Christmas comes around and it breaks the Nintendo cycle. I get a PlayStation 2 for Christmas, and I got Spyro, Enter the Dragonfly, and iToy. So these are very unconventional games for the PlayStation 2. I didn't get any RPGs, I didn't get any of the Grand Theft Autos. It was literally just kind of more of the kiddie games, and I loved the iToy. I thought that was a really fun gimmick for the time. Playing it now is kind of a pain in the ass, but I thought it was really cool for the time, where you have these little ninja guys coming at you. And iToy, if you don't know what that is, it's a little camera that you put on top of your TV and you interact with the game by movement. And it was a lot of fun. My family and I played it for like the entire day that I got it on Christmas. Now, although those two games didn't really directly influence what kind of gamer I became, it opened the door to being open to newer style of games, or different style of games, or things that I'm not really used to. And I loved the PS2. I eventually did get games like Test Drive, Grand Theft Auto 3, helping me explore more of like the mature racing and the mature like open worlds for the time, exploring and the different missions, and it was my gateway into kind of realizing that there was more than just Nintendo. Early on in my life, around the age of 9, this was peak Pokemania. You have to understand, I was the perfect age for this to hit North America. And for my 9th birthday, I got a Kiwi Green Game Boy Color and a copy of Pokemon Yellow, and it was game over from there. The series was on the TV, the toys were at Burger King, and I had a copy of Pokemon Yellow, and everybody in my school was collecting the cards. They were playing the game, they were watching the show. I was prime for this. I mean, you guys, you have to understand. I played Pokemon Yellow all the time. In every car ride, on the bus, I was obsessed. And technically it was my first JRPG, and I didn't really understand that at the time. And I have a hard time viewing it that way today. You know, a turn-based game where you're leveling up your characters and you're collecting items to help your party get through the game. I'm so nostalgic for that game that it kind of is on its own pedestal. But understand that Pokemon Yellow is what really opened the floodgates for my obsession with Pokemon. And that wasn't it for the handhelds. I got a Game Boy Advance in middle school, and this is around the time where Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald are coming out. What's so wild to me is I completely missed Pokemon Silver and Gold and didn't get those until much later in life. And for a topic for another video, pitting the original against Soul Silver and Gold is going to be a very hard topic for me because we've got heavy nostalgia and a game with a lot of improvements. Let me know in the comments down below if that's something you want to hear me talk about. But the Game Boy Advance was really cool. You know, I got some Sonic games for it. That game pretty much hosted everybody on there. I think there was even Crash Bandicoot games. I had Pocky, Rocky, and Becky on there. God, I don't even know what happened to that copy, but it's worth a lot of money now. But the Game Boy Advance was really diverse in what it offered. I feel like a lot of people maybe didn't really think of it that way, but I did. And it also helped me kind of look into new franchises that I had never heard of. By this time, I'm still not that interested in like role-playing games. This doesn't come on until later in my life. So we're still stuck in this like Pokemon and platformer era for myself, and a little bit of PlayStation 2 games. Now, I was gifted my Nintendo GameCube. One of our family members had one sitting around. I didn't know this, and they asked, well, what do you want for Christmas? And I was like, well, Nintendo GameCube, of course. And they had a platinum silver GameCube with Metroid. So now in my house, you know, those older consoles, I'm not 100% sure what happened to them. Maybe my sisters took them. Eventually, when I was younger, they ended up living with their father. So I ended up growing kind of like a single child, but not. And so the game systems were my own by this point. And the GameCube and the PS2 were my primary consoles for a long time. And the GameCube, God, that console is so freaking cool, and it sucks that it didn't do very well. And it's understandable why the prices are so high right now. I was playing Animal Crossing, Melee, all of the, the bigger titles. I didn't actually play Super Mario Sunshine, which is really wild to me. I wonder if I'd like that game more if I played it back then. But I had the Wave Bird, the memory card on Animal Crossing, playing with friends, Harvest Moon. I think it was A Wonderful Life and Magical Melody were on there. And my friend and I, a childhood friend, would play Animal Crossing and Harvest Moon together and have a big book of like codes that we printed out. And he had this like whole binder because, back then we couldn't just take a picture with our phone and just look at it. We couldn't just look it up on the internet. I mean, we could, but you'd want to print it out because the codes were just so much. But I just remember staying up late playing these silly games that didn't really have much to an end to them. They, collectibles and farming, but it was a lot of fun to me. And so those were kind of my first exposure, I guess, to kind of the more casual games. So by this point, I've got, the platformers, the collectathons, the casual gaming, and a little bit of those racing. And so it's really interesting growing up playing video games for a very long period of time and seeing what kind of carves your path to what interests you are wanting to, dive into. I'd be really interested to hear the games that really impacted you and what you think really shifted which way you were paying attention to and what was releasing and what you were wanting to play. And do you think that maybe what age you were and where you were and what was popular at the time really made it to where you were really honing in on a particular genre of games? So at the tail end of high school, I bought a used Xbox 360 from a guy that I was friends with a few games on there, and this was kind of the last time I got a console while I was still in school, not counting like college. So the Xbox 360 was a unique experience for me because Fable 2 was on this console, and that game blew my mind. I loved this game. It was kind of one of the first times where I had a game where I could have a character and be good or evil, and that concept had blown my mind because at that time I hadn't played any games where I got to choose to be evil. If I had explored the PS2 library a little bit more, maybe I would have found some games where I could play more of a bad character. But unfortunately I didn't, and so the Xbox 360 with Fable 2, I was mind blown. I was addicted to that game. I was doing all the side jobs, the side quests. I've replayed that game so many times now. So Fable 2 really opened the door to being more receptive to games like that, where there is a storyline, where you have to upgrade your character, where you take these side jobs and explore the world. And I'm really thankful for that because I think there's a lot of games I wouldn't have tried without Fable 2 kind of pointing me in that direction. I probably won't go much further than the Xbox 360 because then you start getting into like the PS3, the PS4, 5, Switch, Wii U, and those are, I consider, a little bit more modern in the later part of my life. And so the influence has already been done by this point as far as I'm concerned. And so I think the most influential games out of everything I've talked about is definitely Pokemon Yellow, Grand Theft Auto 3, Fable 2, Animal Crossing on the GameCube. And although those are just examples, I think the type of gamer I am today is I definitely prefer platformers. I love platformers. And maybe through my story you can kind of see why. I do not enjoy the modern Pokemon games as much, and I find myself going back to the older ones, and so I'm not sure how that plays into this. I don't know why. I mean, I kind of know why, but I much prefer to play the older style Pokemon games than play anything like Violet or Sword and Shield, and maybe it's because the formula is so different, but I think Pokemon has been encapsulated in my 9, 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old self, and I think that that's kind of where it's going to live. And I'm not saying I'm done with Pokemon. I'm still going to give them a shot once in a while, but for now, I think that's where I'm at. I'm in that bubble of Pokemania, and I think I'm just going to stay there for a little bit longer. Grand Theft Auto 3, that game was a unique concept for me. I got to break into stuff and be a bad guy. And although probably inappropriate for the age I was playing it out, I'm very thankful for the Grand Theft Auto series. I'm really glad that it showed me that games don't have to be this linear thing. You can choose your own path. You can do what you want. And I'm very thankful for that. I'm very thankful for everything that has gotten me to this point. I find a lot of joy in my game room. I love coming in here and looking around and enjoying what I have in front of me. And I might have missed some things that really impacted me growing up. Hell, I might have even missed some consoles that I had growing up. But those are the ones that really stood out to me. And I don't think I will ever give this up. I think that video games will always be a part of my life, and I think it's something that will always continue to grow. I think my interests will change, and I am very open to playing new style of games. I mean, if I hadn't been willing to play Yakuza 0, I never would have discovered that series, and that game changed my freaking, like, everything, really. I mean, and I'll get into that in another video, but I am very thankful that things happened the way that they did, and that I landed with the collection I have. I am very thankful. If you didn't catch it at the beginning, I am nominated for YouTuber of the Month. It's on the channel The Real Bit Wars. Drinking Games with Josh is the one that nominated me, and thank you so much. If you guys feel like you want to drop a comment in that video to give me a vote, I would greatly appreciate it. I would definitely check out the other channels as well. They have some unique content. I'm against, I believe, 3 other channels, and they actually have some pretty cool stuff. I would encourage you guys to check them out and drop a vote in that video of whoever you think deserves to win. And good luck to everybody. And remember, guys, there's a pixelated world waiting out there for you.